All right, everyone. So let's talk about the vice presidential debate that just occurred. Now, right from the beginning, I just want to say I don't really care about this whole vice presidential debate thing. I never really cared about vice presidential debates because the vice president, does he really have that much serious power? Not really. He is just seen as a potential substitute in case the president passes away or has to, be taken off the presidential office for whatever reason. So is it really a serious issue? Not really. More than likely, we're all just going to forget about this debate by tomorrow, or definitely we're all going to forget about this debate in like a week. It's not really that serious. It's very, very fleeting. All presidential debates, it doesn't matter if it's for the presidents or if it's for potential vice presidents. All these debates are just fleeting. They're all very fleeting. We forget about them by the next day or by the next week. If you look at what was it? It was George Bush versus Gore. Does anybody remember the debate between those two? No. There was John Kerry versus Bush. There was Cheney versus Edwards. There was Obama versus McCain. There was Palin versus whoever the hell she went against. Oh, Biden. Yeah, Biden. Then there was Paul Ryan. Remember Paul Ryan? Everybody was kissing that guy's ass. Everybody was saying, oh my goodness, Paul Ryan, he's going to save America. He's amazing. Oh my goodness. There was so much ecstatic enthusiasm for this Paul Ryan guy. Paul Ryan. And no one even remembers the debate between Paul Ryan and Biden. Nobody cares. It's not important. But I do want to say something. Because as I was watching the debate, I did notice something that was eerily different. Eerily different in the Republican Party. You see, the Republican Party for decades has been the party of being pro-life. Being anti-abortion, pro-life, pro-people being allowed the right to be born. And the topic of abortion came up, which wasn't surprising. It always comes up in these debates. The topic of abortion came up, and Vance didn't say, I'm pro-life, abortion is murder, I believe in the right of everyone to be born, I believe in the right to life. In our Declaration of Independence, he didn't do the typical conservative talking point, which is in our Declaration of Independence, it says that everyone is endowed by their creator with the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, I believe in the right to life, and that includes the unborn, etc., etc., etc. He didn't do that. He did not give the typical conservative rhetoric. Instead, he said, well, our party needs to do a better job in promoting welfare programs that will enable women to be mothers. To be honest with you, I wasn't shocked because, you see, I've always known, not always, but for a while I've known that the Republican Party is shifting. It's changing, and it is changing. The Republican Party is not what it used to be. It's not. And we began to really see this change, I want to say, in 2011 or so when Romney was running, and you had the Republican Party pushing this whole log cabin Republican phenomenon, which is basically Republicans who are citizens of the Republic of Sodom, gay Republicans. And they started pushing this whole thing, and that's when I began to notice visibly a serious change in the moral rhetoric of the Republican Party. And it really began to shift from being a party of, family values and tradition and, the whole Judeo-Christian tradition to being just what we see right now. And it's going to continue to change. The Republican Party is more so like the Tea Party. Remember the Tea Party? There was the whole phenomena of the Tea Party. And basically the Tea Party was a group of people who didn't really care so much about moral issues. They cared more about taxes and keeping America away from globalization. They were more for isolationism and for smaller government and lower taxes. Now, I have no issue with supporting those causes. I have no issue with wanting smaller government or wanting less taxes or less globalization. I'm not really, it doesn't really bother me. But my issue is going away or shifting away from the moral issues in the name of gaining more popularity. Because that's what happened. The Republicans began to say, back in the early 2010s, the Republicans began to say, okay, people are becoming more and more favorable towards Sodom, so we should do the same thing. And you're starting to see that shift in abortion, where the Republican Party is not so much focusing on abortion as much anymore. And you could say, well, it's because the Republicans overturned Roe v. Wade, so the cause is kind of dead. And maybe you're right. Maybe that probably is one of the reasons as to why. But I also think it's because the Republican Party is just not focusing on moral issues as much as it used to. It's just not. There's a shift. And this whole thing with, let's say, abortion. I remember not too long ago reading about how the Republican Party wrote up an agenda for itself. And abortion had a very, very minuscule presence in that plan. They weren't really focusing too much on it. And I think that this is really reflective of the times that we live in. It's also just reflective of the current zeitgeist. It's just not so much of an issue anymore. And you could say, well, it's because they overturned Roe v. Wade. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree. But abortion is still there. That's the thing. It's just become a state's issue. Roe v. Wade is still there. It has just been turned into a state's issue, which is better than what we had before. No doubt. It's better than what we had before. But nonetheless, it is changing. The whole perspective, the attention to that topic is becoming less and less. And J.D. Vance starts talking about, how we need better welfare programs to get people to have more kids. I don't think that that's going to really promote the birth rate, to be honest with you. I really don't. I don't think welfare programs are going to promote birth rates. In France, you can read up on this. In France, they spent 4% of their GDP on welfare programs to encourage women to have children. And these welfare programs did not boost up the birth rates. They did not increase the birth rates. In South Korea, they have spent so much money. Billions of dollars. I mean, just tons of money. I don't know the exact number, but it's just tons and tons of money. The South Korean government has poured tons of money into welfare programs to promote higher birth rates, because South Korea right now has the lowest birth rate in the world. The government was saying, okay, we will give you free money. We're going to give you free money so that you can take care of a child, because you guys are talking about how, well, we have to work and a baby's going to get in the way of my job. Okay, we'll pay you. We will pay you money. And they're still not having kids. They are still not having kids. They don't work. And the reason why they don't work, and people always sit there and talk about how, well, we need better welfare programs. And Vance is getting into this, and I've noticed a lot of right-wingers getting more and more into this way of talking, which is just, we need more welfare programs. Well, if the government had more welfare programs, if the government had better programs, welfare, money, better programs, so that people could afford having children, then people would have more children, and it's just bullshit. But a lot of right-wingers are getting more and more into this way of talking, because I've noticed that a lot of right-wingers are getting more and more warm to the idea of socialism. Oh, yeah. I've seen this on Twitter, and I'm not saying that it's this huge widespread movement or phenomena or anything like that, but it is there. There is this growing movement within American rightism, which basically says we need nationalism and we need socialism. Yeah, I'll let you guys put 1 and 2 together. We need nationalism and we need socialism, kind of like National Socialism. And you kind of saw that with Vance when he started talking about how we need better programs to help enable people. And again, I don't have an issue with welfare programs. I don't have an issue with welfare programs. But this idea of this idea that says welfare programs are going to boost up the birth rates, I think is just garbage. And of course, you have people who will push for welfare because they have some sort of an insidious agenda. There's always that. But the idea of welfare unto itself, I don't see an issue with that. I don't. Government is supposed to be there to help people, and if people need some help, if you have a single mom who needs some help, I have no issue with that at all. But this idea that it's going to boost up birth rates, I think, is complete nonsense. And Vance was sitting there saying, he was sitting there saying, well, if we had better welfare programs, then we wouldn't have all this abortion. And I think that's just a bunch of garbage, because people have abortions. And don't give me this bull. And Americans love to play this game. Well, there was a woman who was about to die and she needed an abortion. I'm not talking about that. And that's another thing that pisses me off about a lot of people, is that a lot of people do this bullcrap where they make the exception the rule. This just pisses me off. Like, yes, there are exceptions to the rule. Yes, if a woman is going to die, right, and she needs an abortion to be saved, I don't have an issue with terminating the pregnancy at that point to save that woman's life. I don't. But that is the exception. Most women are not getting abortions because they're about to die. Now, I wish, and to his credit, I did see Steve Crowder use this argument, to his credit. But I wish more and more conservatives utilize this argument and say, okay, we will allow abortion only in the case of a woman being on the verge of death. We'll allow that. All the other cases, no. They'll say, well, no, we can't have that. We also have to allow voluntary abortion. Okay, so you want to allow elective abortion. Why not just say, we want elective abortion? Why use these little personal stories to pull at people's heartstrings? Why are you doing that? Why don't you just say, I believe in abortion no matter the reason? You have to use these exceptional situations to justify abortion because you want to manipulate people into supporting your cause. That's it. That's the only reason why. But there was Walz using this way of argumentation, and he said, well, I know this woman in Texas, and she was about to die, and blah, 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 she needed an abortion, and blah, 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 and all this stuff. It's like, okay, so the exception becomes the rule. The exception becomes the rule. And instead of Vance saying, and I like the way that Trump handled it. When Trump, man, I can't believe I'm saying this. I think Trump looked better in his debate than Vance did. That's my opinion. Now, you're going to have all these sycophants who are going to come out and they're going to say things like, I think Vance was very professional. Trump was entertaining. You know, they're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats. Trump was entertaining. But Trump, every time the topic of abortion has been brought up in a debate, in a presidential debate, Trump has been pretty consistent. He will say the Democrats want to kill babies at the freaking 9th month. And Democrats always sit there and say, oh, no, we don't. And I love how Democrats are just ashamed of that. They're just ashamed of the idea of partial birth abortion. As if freaking Bill Clinton wasn't pushing for the legalization of partial birth abortion. And they all love Bill Clinton. But Bill Clinton was all for partial birth abortion. But when you bring up partial birth abortion today, everyone steers clear away from it. And they're saying, oh, they will always denounce it, and they'll say, no, we're not for it, because they know that shit is wrong. Even though they would support it if given free reign, they know that it's wrong. They know that it's morally absolutely evil. Now, the governor of Virginia, he's all for abortion, even after the baby has survived the abortion. Kill the child. And Kamala Harris is for that, by the way. You can look into this, but Kamala Harris is for allowing babies who have survived abortions to just die. And I've looked into this myself. The Democrats are all for it, but they act like they're not for it. They act like, oh, no, we're not really for that, and blah, blah, blah. If given free reign, they would do it. But because because so many people are repulsed by that in the public, they have to act like they're not for it. But Trump always brought that up. He always brought up the extreme situations, saying, you Democrats are extreme, and you would allow for abortion even after the baby is out of the womb. Or you would allow for abortion when the the embryo is pretty close to being fully developed. And he would fight the Democrats on that. Trump would. In a debate, Trump fights the Democrats on that. He fought Hillary Clinton. I remember when he debated Hillary Clinton. And he said, he brought up the most graphic description of abortion he could think of. A baby being put through a machine, being cut to pieces. And he brought that up. He said, this is barbaric. It's a barbaric act. And it is a barbaric act. And he pushed it. He pushed the envelope. He brought up a graphic description of abortion. But Vance didn't do that. Vance did not do that. Vance sits there and he brings up how we need welfare programs to prevent abortion. That's the same type of argument that leftists or liberals or Democrats use. That's the same type of argument. I've heard all these pro-choicers make up this argument. Well, if there are better welfare programs, we need better welfare programs. Blah, 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 blah. Women who have abortions do so because, morally speaking, they just don't really care. And I hear stories about how, there's all these women who feel ashamed of what they did. Of course they feel ashamed of it, because they know that what they did is wrong. But when they go to the abortion clinic and they go through the whole process to have an abortion, they don't give a damn. They don't. They don't give a damn. And believe me, everyone in America has heard the traditional view. All these women who have had abortions, believe me, they all have grandmothers. I'm pretty certain they've all heard of Christianity from grandma. Pretty certain they've all heard about the Bible from grandma. They don't give a damn. They don't. They don't give a damn. It's the same thing with the birth rates. They say, well, if we could just have some good old-fashioned welfare programs, the birth rates will go up. They tried that bullshit in France. 4% of France's GDP. 4% of GDP. That's like what America spends on its military. And it didn't work. South Korea's put I want to say billions. I'm just going to say it. You can fact check me on this, but I'm pretty certain South Korea has poured in billions of dollars into welfare programs, saying, we'll give you free money. We'll do this. We'll even give you free taxi rides while you are pregnant. Blah, blah. We'll do all this stuff for you. Please just have a child, damn it. You guys are just having 200-something thousand kids in a year. That's not enough for the damn replacement rate. You're destroying South Korea. South Korea is a very... what's the word that rightists love to use? Homogenous. It's a very homogenous society. Very little immigration into South Korea. And yet South Korea, with very little immigration, being a very homogenous society, is still destroying itself. Proving that even if you have a first world country with little to no immigration, and that's very homogenous, it'll still destroy itself. Why? Because it's godless and it's filled with feminism. You don't need immigration for a country to destroy itself from within. And the South Korean women are saying, no, we don't care about your welfare programs. We don't give a damn. It doesn't work. Now you can say, well, why doesn't it work? Here's a very simple answer. People who aren't going to have kids don't want to have kids. It really comes down to that. Well, they need more money. If that were the case, wealthier people would be having all the kids, but they're not. It's the poorer people who are having more kids. Middle-class people, people who are higher up in the socioeconomic realm, they're not having as much kids. And when people get more money, they tend to have less kids. You even see this happening in Africa. People say, well, Africa has such a high birth rate. Some areas of Africa have higher birth rates, but the birth rates in Africa, in many African countries, from what I have heard, or from a lot of African countries, are having lower birth rates. Why? Maybe because people are getting more money in African countries. It has nothing to do with money, not having enough money. Because if that were the case, I look at what Americans spend their money on. DoorDash. It's a huge money drain. DoorDash, Netflix, Vimeo, Mimeo, whatever freaking app, they spend money on all sorts of stuff. They put a lease on a car, put a lease on that car, put a lease on this car, put a lease. People spend money on all sorts of stuff. They don't care. Children are just really not a priority for a lot of people. The thing is that people who say, well, we can't do it because of money, I think a lot of these people are just too ashamed to just say, we just don't want freaking kids because they're annoying. I wish more and more people just said it. I wish they just said the quiet part out loud. They don't want kids because they're freaking annoying. They don't want to deal with screaming babies at 3 a.m. You know, it's just, that's what it is at the end of the day. I don't think it has anything to do with money. If that were the case, then France would have a higher birth rate because of all the welfare programs, and South Korea would be having a higher birth rate because of all the welfare programs that the South Korean government has invested money into. But it just doesn't work. Because they say America spends so little on welfare for mothers or whatever. Probably because America knows that it's bullshit. And it's pointless. It's not going to bring the birth rate up. Now, again, I have no issue with welfare programs for mothers or single mothers, or married mothers for that matter. I don't have an issue with welfare. I don't. I am not anti-welfare. People say, "Oh, are you a socialist?" I don't know. I don't know if I would call myself a socialist, but I don't see what the moral issue is with welfare. I don't. I just don't agree that welfare is going to bring the birth rate up. I just don't agree. I think birth rates and all that have a lot more to do with just tradition. And tradition is something that is very lacking all over the world. All over the world. South Korea, you know, there's a lot of feminism there. Israel, there's a lot of religious people in Israel, and Israel has a very high birth rate. And they're a first world country, but yet they have a very high birth rate. How do you explain that? It's because of tradition. Whereas if you look at a lot of other first world countries, you'll see people with money not having kids, and people who are kind of in the middle not really having a lot of kids. People who are poor having a lot of kids. So why is there such a disconnect? It's because there's a lack of tradition. A lot of it has to do with a lack of tradition, I think. Anyway, those are my thoughts on that. And that's it. I just rambled on for 22 minutes. There you go. We're all going to forget about this debate. Most of us will forget about this debate by tomorrow. If not, then you'll forget about the debate in about a week. Funny thing is that Israel was the first topic to be asked about because Israel got bombed today. And then after that, it was like 5 minutes on Israel. And all right, let's talk about climate change. And they spent so much time on climate change. It was so bloody annoying. Climate change is a topic that I find to be very tedious, and I think a lot of other people would agree with me. It's a very, very tedious topic because it really doesn't mean much. Climate change. I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to stop the weather because you're going to put regulations on companies or something like that? I mean, even before the world had factories, even before the world had industry and cars and electricity, you had massive floods, earthquakes. Read medieval history. You read so many times in medieval history, oh, there was a drought this year and there was a famine in the village. We had to go to the next village to survive. I mean, it was very, very common. And they had no industry. They had no car. And there was starvation in those days. Starvation. And there was no cars. There was no industry. There was no coal mining. It was all just people living in huts. People living in freaking rock stone houses and lighting fires to cook their roasts, to cook their roast rump or whatever it was called. People had bows and arrows and they were killing each other without even electricity. There was no industry. They sit there and they act like the world would be a better place if we just got rid of all industry and all cities and if we all just sort of lived in nature. And, you know, people lived in nature for thousands of years with no electricity and they still slaughtered each other. I'm reading about the 100 Years' War. And I'm reading about Irish dudes killing French people and taking little French infants and hanging the infants on the back of their horses as trophies. I mean, there was no social media in those days, and people were still evil. And you could use the typical meme: no iPhones in sight, just people living life, living the dream. Oh yeah, babies hanging from the backs of horses. And you had these Irish knifemen. Pretty certain this was like a remnant from their old pre-Christian pagan days, but they would come back with the decapitated heads of Frenchmen. They would pass them around like trophies. They would hold the heads up like trophies. I mean, this is demonic stuff, and this is from medieval Europe. There was no electricity, no social media, no iPhone, and whoopity-doo, whoopity-doo. Are you shocked? People were still evil. So if you got rid of all the electricity, all the industry, all the smog or whatever, people are still going to be dying from natural disasters. They're still going to be dying. Every time there's a flood in this world, oh, it's climate change, as if there weren't any floods before big industry. You can read about China going all the way back to the, 1930s, 1920s. You'll read about a drought that happened during the Second World War. Massive famine in China. Millions of Chinese died from the famine. They didn't have all the industry that we have now. China at that time was nowhere near as industrious as it is now, and yet you had millions of people dying from a famine. People died from floods. People died from all sorts of stuff, earthquakes. And there was no industry. I'm not sure if I buy into all this stuff. But every time, see, this is what I find so funny about the whole climate change discussion. They talk a lot about climate change in Europe. They say, oh, we have to get rid of coal mining. We have to get rid of using coal as a source of energy in Europe because, it's going to destroy Gaia. It's going to destroy Mother Earth or whatever. Russia invaded Ukraine. And then all of a sudden people were thinking, wait a second, we stopped using coal as energy and we started relying more on natural gas, and we're getting the natural gas from Russia, but now we can't really get the natural gas from Russia because we're all supposed to hate Russia now. So what are we going to do? And you saw Europeans going right back to coal energy. And all these environmentalists in Europe, what are you doing? All the work we did for nothing. Coal energy now coming back. Yeah, either we get natural gas from Russia, but we hate Russia, so we can't get it from them, so we're going to be going right back to coal energy. It's just a silly discussion. People are going to use coal when they absolutely have to. In an emergency, they're going to go right. They can do all the pro-environmentalist policies they want. When push comes to shove, they're going to go back to using the energy that they need to survive. It's just bottom line. It's like during World War II. The Germans were using, what was it? They were using synthetic petroleum. Oh, yeah. How did the Germans come up with that? I think they got the idea from the Rockefeller. What was it? It was from some American petroleum company. I think it was Rockefeller Oil or Rockefeller Petroleum or something like that. But they got the idea from the United States, I believe. And the Germans began to do it. They began to utilize this idea, and it powered much of their military machines, synthetic petroleum. And the Germans figured out how to make synthetic petroleum with coal, because the Germans said, okay, we don't have any oil. They were getting a lot of the oil from Romania, and they also wanted to get the oil from Azerbaijan, which is interesting because Germany today wants to use oil from Azerbaijan. And the Germans said, okay, well, we need a lot more stuff than the oil from Romania. So they started making their own synthetic petroleum, because the Germans said, what do we have in abundance? Coal. Perfect. People are going to do what they have to do. Climate change. It's just a lot of that stuff goes right out the window when it comes down to it. Anyway, that's enough talking. I've talked for almost 30 minutes now. Anyway, see you guys later. You guys just heard some theology. God bless.